What's happening, everybody? It's Sean with Reactions to the Classics, and today I've got a top 10/14 selections of female pop singers of the 1960s. It's the top 10 series. We got 14 songs today, a supersized version brought to you by a friend, longtime supporter and patron of the channel, Cat Dub. Thank you, Cat Dub. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the patrons that make this thing go. If you'd like to support us in any way, check out the Patreon link below or the Patreon link on the end screen. We could not do it without them. Now, this list is phenomenal, and Cat Dub's research on this is phenomenal. So we are just going to jump in with, these are all Cat Dub's words. I didn't have to do anything on this one. I'm just going to sit back and take it all in. So Cat Dub says, this playlist celebrates the young women who face the world of pop music on their own, competing directly with vocal groups and R&B and rock bands, but persevering with their musical dreams, even when the changing times and tastes seemed to label their approach obsolete. A 1960s pop vocalist still needed to have real chops in the manner of the crooners of the 1950s. Rock bands could get away with lesser vocal ability as long as they had something more distinct and personable about the vocals. The mainstream pop vocalists had to have more, all caps. This chronological, so remember, it's not a top like 10 or 14 to 1. This chronological playlist is intended as a quick survey, and so I had to leave out a number of worthy artists. Note that this playlist does not include well-known rock performers like Janis Joplin and pop superstar Barbra Streisand, since they get plenty of attention elsewhere. This is more of a history lesson in what pop of the early 1960s sounded like before the guitar-oriented rock bands completely dominated the scene. The last two tracks give an indication of what the music of the 70s was going to sound like. One of the most notable differences between 1960s pop arrangements for solo singers and that of the rock bands would be the inclusion of horn and string sections in the instrumental backing. Also, background singers were often used as well to fill out the vocal sound and provide maximum impact. All right, the music will not be in this video, but click on that Vimeo link below so you can follow along on this journey with me. Let's kick this thing off with an artist I had never even heard of. We got Skeeter Davis from 1962, The End of the World. Composers on this are Arthur Kent and Sylvia D. Cat Dub says, Skeeter Davis was a popular country singer who then became a crossover country pop artist beginning in 1962 with the release of this song, which was produced by guitar great Chet Atkins in Nashville. The recording peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 behind Our Day Will Come by Ruby and the Romantics, number 2 on Billboard's Hot Country Singles Chart, number 1 on Billboard's Easy Listening Chart, number 4 on Billboard's Hot R&B Singles Chart. It's the first and to date only time that a song cracked the top 10 and top 5, for that matter, on all 4 Billboard charts. Billboard ranked this as the number 2 song of 1963. Davis mostly stuck to light country pop arrangements throughout the rest of her career and did have a number of hits on the country charts, but never again managed to reach the top of the pop charts, a much harder chart to reach. I'm going to have the lyrics up as always. Thanks again, Cat Dub. The End of the World. You heard that much more rich arrangement in there, right? That arrangement was fantastic behind Skeeter. And I mean, this guy did Skeeter wrong. She's wondering why all these things still happen, because the end of the world's coming, because he doesn't love her anymore. So, I mean, why are you doing all these things? Because it's pointless, right? So, you know, it's music of the time. A lot of songs were written. It's either I love you and I'm with you forever, or the person left. I mean, that's pretty much late 50s and all 60s all the way up to probably like 65 songwriting, maybe even 66 for a lot of people. So, you know, and it's enjoyable, but really good voice, really well done. Next up, we have Françoise Hardy. Yes, Cat Dub helped me with some phonetics here. With The Time of Love. I'm not even going to give you the French, right? But Cat Dub says the French reaction to the rock and roll explosion in the US and UK was relatively cool compared to their earlier interest in jazz styles. They had a subgenre of pop that was referred to as yeah, I think it's how you say the way it is, girls. A reference to all the yeah-yeahs being sung by the British invasion bands like the Beatles. The French pop scene did have one standout talent in their midst, a young singer-songwriter by the name of Françoise Hardy. She was unusual in that she insisted on writing and recording her own material from the start, which really wasn't done back then. And by 1964, she was recording in London, not Paris, to get better and hipper instrumental backing on her songs. Shy, thin, and pretty, with an innate sense of personal style, she looked the part of a swinging London fashion model, but without any of the usual pretensions. In fact, Hardy did not much like the celebrity aspects of pop music, and for a period retired from the scene to live a quieter life. She did reappear at various times. In the 1980s, she made 2 high-profile guest appearances on songs by Blur and Malcolm McLaren. Although never particularly well known in the US, Hardy was an important influence on British pop artists and style makers. Her laid-back, understated approach to arrangements would outlast the multi-layered bombast of the Phil Spector wall of sound, and was the approach favored by all singer-songwriters throughout the 1970s. My guess is that Nico, of course, the Velvet Underground and Nico fame, knew Hardy's recordings well. The single was released in 1962 when Hardy was just 18. A couple of fun facts that ANCAT Dub includes: Bob Dylan immortalized her in prose on the back cover of 1964's Another Side of Bob Dylan album, a very underrated album in Dylan's catalog, especially of that time period. Mick Jagger called her his ideal woman in an interview. Now, I don't know how many women Mick Jagger called his ideal women. Probably more than one, but still high praise. Her music has appeared in various films, including Wes Anderson's Moonrise Kingdom. All right, first 2 artists, I didn't know either one of them. Let's do it. Another quick one. I don't speak French, but you don't have to. I was looking at the translated lyrics, but really good backing arrangement there. And that was kind of ANCAT Dub's point there towards the end of the introductory write-up. At the Time of Love. And basically, now I'm looking at translated lyrics, so if you speak French, this is probably not exact, because I don't ever trust the translated lyrics, because how can I? Because I don't know if they're right or not, but because The Time of Love is long and it's short, it lasts forever, one remembers it. That's the predominant theme throughout here. And remember, she's only 18 when she's singing this, but enjoyed it. You could hear confidence in her voice, right? You could hear that kind of just, very much confidence, not arrogance, but real confidence, even at 18. And I think you got to have that if you're going to be out here at that age putting stuff out. Well, next up, we have an artist. I know the name. I don't know that I know any of her stuff. We're going with he's, in parentheses, Quiet Guy, Darlene Love. Recorded in 1963, released in 1964. Composers are Phil Spector, Vinnie Poncia, and Peter Androli. Ranked among Rolling Stone's 100 greatest singers, she was inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2011. She's featured in the Oscar-winning documentary film 20 Feet from Stardom in 2013, for which she won a Grammy Award. ANCAT Dub says, for producer-composer Phil Spector, Darlene Love was the vocal equivalent to the Wrecking Crew instrumentalist. She was the one brought in to either fill out the sound or sing lead, often without any fanfare. She was the great could have been who never really became famous. Spector had many vocal groups in his stable of artists, but very few solo singers. One sort of exception was Darlene Love. Spector used her to provide background vocals for a number of artists, but also to record the lead voice, not always crediting her. That's a bad thing, man. Such as on He's a Rebel, which was credited to the Crystals and reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart in November of 1962. And He's Sure the Boy I Love, also credited to the Crystals. She fronted a female group known as the Blossoms for many years and was a member of the trio called Bob B. Sox and the Blue Jeans. She went on to record 6 Phillies record singles under her own name, including Wait Till My Bobby Gets Home, went to 26 in 1963. Today I Met the Boy I'm Going to Marry, went to 39 in 1963. A Fine Fine Boy, 53 in 1963. And the arguably better and more beautiful Strange Love and He's a Quiet Guy, which is paired with the equally great Stumble and Fall. But the single was inexplicably pulled from circulation by Phil Spector. He's a Quiet Guy was chosen for this playlist because the production is less murky sounding than most Spector singles and more revealing of Love's voice. She also performed 4 songs as lead vocalist on Spector's classic Christmas album. Wow, that album's great, man. Love continued to sing with the Blossoms throughout the 1960s. They were regulars on Shindig and toured with Elvis Presley in the early 70s. She also sang back up for Dionne Warwick for 10 years beginning in 1971 and later backing Aretha Franklin. Got another fun fact from ANCAT Dub. Darlene's younger sister Edna Wright was the lead singer of the R&B group Honeycomb, which scored a number 1 hit with 1 ads in 1971. And I listened to that song in the R&B Gems Artist Spotlight that ANCAT Dub did. That was fantastic. Both singers singing lead on Billboard number 1 hits may be some kind of record. It's got to be up there, right? That's quite the thing. All right, Darlene Love, He's a Quiet Guy. You can tell Darlene has a great voice. The arrangement, once again, was fantastic. The keys were a little bigger on this one than some of the other ones. But I will say this, I think ANCAT Dub was sort of alluding to this at times, but the band is still turned up. Like the arrangement is still turned up too high. And it sort of drowns her vocals out, especially in the first half of the song. Not totally, but you can tell she has a pristine voice that you want to hear more. Like mix that thing closer to me. Let the arrangement still flow, but like get her a little closer to me. But I thought that was really good. Next up, we have Don't Turn Your Back on Me by Jackie DeShannon in 1964, who was also the composer. ANCAT says, Jackie DeShannon's family lived in Kentucky before moving to Illinois, where her mother was from. From an early age, she was performing country songs on local radio. She eventually hosted her own radio show called Breakfast Melodies on radio station WMRO in Tennessee. Even though her family had moved to Illinois before she became a teenager, she was always able to infuse her music with a Kentucky aura, no matter who she worked with and what kind of songs she performed. So she had her own radio show before she was even a teenager. That's crazy. Most people identify Jackie DeShannon with her iconic recording of Bacharach and David's What the World Needs Now Is Love. Oh, I know that song. Released in 1965. But she also composed her own songs, one of the earliest female singer-songwriters of the rock era. Of her own recorded compositions, her Put a Little Love in Your Heart charted highest. That song's great, too. I just didn't know who Jackie DeShannon was. Hitting number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1969. Don't Turn Your Back on Me is taken from her third album of the same name. It was written and recorded by her in 1964 and has an obvious British invasion band energy to it. Not exactly accidental, though. She had traveled to England to record and hopefully spark some interest in her work. As it happened, her biggest break came in 1964 when she supported a little group called the Beatles on their first U.S. tour and formed a touring band with guitarist Ry Cooder. Although the lyrics are cliche on this number, but they are in a lot of these. I mean, that's fine, man. That's the times, right? The production of the guitars is kind of unusual. This song and the album happened to feature a young session guitarist by the name of Jimmy Page. DeShannon and Page would become an item for a period, but both being ambitious drifted apart when career demands took them in different directions. Note that Jimmy Page wrote the Led Zeppelin song Tangerine after the breakup of his relationship with DeShannon in early 1965. I did not know that. That's one of my favorite Zepp songs. Very underrated Zepp song. In the early 1970s, Jackie DeShannon, along with Donna Weiss, penned the song Betty Davis Eyes, which ended up being a huge hit for Kim Carnes later in 1981, holding the number 1 spot for 5 weeks. And if memory serves me right, that was also the number 1 song of the year in 1981. So even though I didn't know who Jackie DeShannon was, I know a lot of her work. I don't know this song, though. All right, Don't Turn Your Back on Me. Basically, she's just telling this guy she wants to be with him, and why won't he be with her? Which, that's music of the time. There's nothing wrong with it. I actually like that song a lot. I thought the guitar work was fantastic. Thought the production was crystal clear. She sounded really good. So yeah, I just enjoyed that. The drumming was a little more prominent, mixed to the front than it's going to be on some of these others, I have a feeling. Next up, we have Barbara Lewis from Someday We're Gonna Love Again from 1964. Composer on this is Sharon McMahon. ANCAT Dub says Barbara Lewis is an American singer and songwriter. She is best known for composing and recording the hit single Hello Stranger, which reached number 3 on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 chart and number 1 on the R&B chart. That song has been covered by a number of artists, most notably by Yvonne Elliman, and it's also appeared in films and TV shows. Lewis composed all of the songs on her debut album, titled Hello Stranger, and the Hammond organ played by John Young was featured prominently on a number of the album's tracks. Someday We're Gonna Love Again is a spirited track from Lewis's second album, Presenting Barbara Lewis. I chose it for this playlist because it has more high energy and rocking than some of her other singles. Unfortunately, the song didn't even crack the Billboard Top 100 because radio listeners were mesmerized by the British invasion bands. Just a few months later, England's The Searchers covered Someday We're Gonna Love Again and had a top 40 hit with it. In 1964, it paid to be British. Yeah, it did, man, right? Lewis's older style of R&B couldn't compete with guitar bands and the psychedelic rock and pop that was soon all the rage. By 1968, after repeatedly failing to find another hit, she basically retired from the music business, although she did continue to perform occasionally back home in Michigan. All right, Someday We're Gonna Love Again. Much more traditional arrangement of what I would think of at this time. Basically, this guy left her, but she said, it's okay because we're going to get back together, so I don't have to worry about it for very long. I'd like to arrange to see you at some time, she says at the end, because, she's just holding out hope this guy's going to come back, even though he told her that his feelings had changed. Really good tone to her voice. The backing with we got the little hand claps, and that was just so prevalent during this time. But yeah, I mean, another artist I'd never heard of. Really good. Now we're going to stay with artists I do not know. Jackie Trent from 1965, Where Are You Now, My Love? Composers were Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent. ANCAT Dub says the first half of the 1960s was the era of the big voice, big hair girl singers. British songstress Jackie Trent possessed a strong voice and sang in a lounge cabaret style. She's probably best known for co-writing songs with her husband Tony Hatch, who's often referred to as the British Burt Bacharach. perhaps due to the sophisticated music arrangements he favored. I suppose that makes Jackie Trent the British Hal David. I think so. Trent wrote or co-wrote more than 400 numbers over her career. Throughout the 1960s, the duo penned hit songs for Petula Clark and crooner Scott Walker, among others. The lush ballad Where Are You Now, My Love became Trent's only #1 hit in the UK as a singer. She managed to crack the top 40 in the UK a couple more times, but the pop audience plainly reacted better to her songs when they were done by other artists. That's all right, man. She's still cashing those checks. Those writing checks are nice. Where Are You Now, My Love? Also more of a traditional backing on there, right? Very clear on her vocals. She enunciates very nicely. The middle verse, I thought, is where she really hit her stride when she's talking about life was fine, full of the wonder of the spring. You taught me that love meant everything. I gave you my heart, not dreaming we'd ever part. So, it's a predominant theme here, right? For some reason, all these poor women singers are given that they all had their hearts broken. So that's kind of the predominant theme here so far. But I thought Jackie sounded really good, really nice vocals. Next up, you see it below, we got Nancy Wilson. Where Does That Leave Me? From 1965, composers Van McCoy. Ancat Dub says, Sean first heard Nancy Wilson sing with Cannonball Adderley's band in the Jazz Vocal Gems playlist, and it was fantastic. Now we have one of Wilson's pop recordings to admire. She was never exclusive to any one music genre. Instead, she preferred to simply call herself a song stylist, a moniker that could better encompass her wide range of musical interests. As with the great jazz singers, Wilson's voice was her instrument, and she had stunning command of its nuances. There's always great precision in her singing, even though Wilson used to claim that she never knew exactly what she would do with the song until the recording tape was rolling. She's all power and majesty on this one. Probably not a track intended for the teen audience, but instead for the older cocktail-sipping adult crowd. These days, Dionne Warwick is probably the best known of the 1960s pop singers, female pop singers, but at the time, Wilson was often in the public eye because she was in all kinds of things. She appeared on episodes of many popular TV shows of the day: I Spy, The FBI, Room 222, The Great Hawaii Five-0, the original, Police Story, The Jack Paar Program, The Sammy Davis Jr. Show, The Danny Kaye Show, The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, The Cosby Show, The Andy Williams Show, The Carol Burnett Show, The Ed Sullivan Show, The Merv Griffin Show, The Tonight Show, all the way up into the 90s, right? Late 80s, early 90s, The Arsenio Hall Show, and The Flip Wilson Show, among others. She even had her own series on NBC, The Nancy Wilson Show, that aired from 1967 to 1968. In other words, Ancat Dub says Nancy Wilson was once well known in American pop culture for both singing and acting appearances, but she's one of the great performers that for some reason faded from the public memory. Nice arrangement on this one because, she's asking, the guy's gone, where does this leave me? It kind of builds up in the arrangement, right? You've got the nice percussion in here and just kind of ramping like, where am I going to be now that he's gone? So I really like her voice. She almost does a speaking in there and then just comes into that just beautiful holding of notes. So really, really good. Now we're up to somebody I definitely know who they are because they had a couple hits and they also hosted the classic Solid Gold back in the day TV show. That's how I knew her when I was a little kid. Are You There? In parentheses, with Another Girl. Dionne Warwick, 1965. Composed, of course, Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Warwick ranks among the 40 biggest U.S. hitmakers between 1955 and 1999 based on her chart history on Billboard's Hot 100 Pop Singles chart. She's the second most charted female vocalist during the rock era in 1955 to 1999. She's also one of the most charted vocalists of all time, with 56 of her singles making the Hot 100 between 62 and 98, 12 of them the top 10, and 80 singles in total, either solo or collaboratively, making the Hot 100 R&B or adult contemporary charts. She ranks number 74 on the Billboard Hot 100's Greatest Artists of All Time. I mean, I didn't realize she had that kind of acclaim, right? Because it's a lot before my time. During her career, she sold more than 100 million albums worldwide. She's won many awards, including 6 Grammys. She's inducted into the Hollywood Walk of Fame, the Grammy Hall of Fame, the R&B Music Hall of Fame, and the Apollo Theater Walk Hall of Fame. In 2019, she won the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. 3 of her songs, Walk On By, Alfie, and Don't Make Me Over, have been inducted in the Grammy Hall of Fame. She's a former Goodwill ambassador for the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization. Ancat says she became the primary muse of composer Burt Bacharach during the 1960s. This and many other Warwick recordings of the era was produced and arranged by Bacharach. Of the many songs produced and arranged by him, I particularly like the arrangement used on this recording. It's a little bit R&B, it's a little bit rock and roll, and there's plenty of pop. But the end product feels organic and all of a piece to me. This song was actually the 3rd single released from the album Here I Am. The the first two having failed to chart. This one did become a top 40 hit. The album is actually a fairly strong album, despite the public's disinterest in the singles. All right, are you there with another girl? Self-explanatory what it's about. She loves him, she trusts him, but she really doesn't because he sees two silhouettes in the window. Here's his radio on. She doesn't believe that he's not there with another girl, even though he professed his love for Dionne. But the star of this is the production and the arrangement, right? The arrangement is absolutely perfect. It's full. It comes in and hammers out points when she's singing them. It's just spot on. And that's what I would expect from Bacharach and David on here, and just the way this song is done. But it is absolutely professional musicianship at its finest. Okay, next up, another artist I don't know, Peggy March, Losing My Touch from 1965. Composers are Frank Katana and Sal Tramaci. Peggy March is remembered by many as a young one-hit wonder. She holds a record for youngest person to reach number one on the Billboard Hot 100 chart. But March actually made a number of worthwhile recordings in the 1960s, and her vocal powers only grew as she aged. The track Losing My Touch off the album In Our Fashion gives us Peggy March at the ripe old age of 17, singing in a voice of impressive maturity and worldliness, a true professional. Unfortunately, Peggy March never had a Burt Bacharach to keep her supplied with A-level material, or a Quincy Jones to mentor and steer her through the treacherous waters of the music business. She never received the support necessary to stay high in the U.S. Billboard charts as a pop singer. She eventually moved to Germany to continue her music career. A few little facts or quotes about her. On March 24th, 1963, her single I Will Follow Him soared to number one on the U.S. charts. She recorded the song in early January 63. It was released on January 22nd when she was only 14. March became the youngest female artist with a number one hit at 15 in late April 1963, a record that still stands for the Billboard Hot 100. It also reached number one in Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Japan, and Scandinavia, although it failed to chart in the UK. She became the first white female solo artist to hit number one on the Billboard R&B chart. Her success also came with financial trouble. She was a minor, and the Coogan Law prevented her parents from managing her money. The responsibility was placed on her manager, Russell Smith. It was discovered in 1966 that he had squandered the fortune, leaving her with $500. In 1984, Jermaine Jackson and Pia Zadora achieved a major European hit single with the track When the Rain Begins to Fall, co-written by her by March. Although not a hit in the UK or in the US, it went to number one in Germany, France, the Netherlands, and Switzerland. And I think I might remember the video to that song. All right, let's check it out. Losing My Touch, Peggy March. Wonderful voice on her. Only 17 years old, remember, when she's singing this wonderful maturity there. And the percussion background of all this, the drumming, the percussion on a lot of these songs is similar pattern. This one kind of, as the song built, went above and beyond, and the percussion hit in there, the drumming hit to emphasize what she was singing. And, you have those same faint background vocals on a lot of them, just like Dan Cat Dub pointed out at the beginning. But, a lot of these songs, I don't have a bit to add. We just got to listen to them and see what we think, because they're very arranged. They're arranged very much the same way. And the subject matter on that point was the same. She's losing her touch, and the guy is gonna leave her, or probably gonna leave her. Next up, we have Leslie Gore from 1965. What Am I Gonna Do With You? Composers are Jerry Goffin and Russ Titelman. Leslie Gore was more or less discovered by young Quincy Jones, then worked as an A&R man for Mercury Records. When Gore's vocal coach sent in some piano and voice recordings of the 16-year-old high school girl, Jones decided then and there he would become her producer, and the rest is history. The music world discovered the talents of both Leslie Gore and Quincy Jones as kind of a package deal. New York Times talked about Miss Gore. He said, Miss Gore recorded It's My Party on March 30th, 1963. When Mr. Jones discovered that Phil Spector and the Crystals were also recording the song, he then released it within a week. It reached number one and was followed onto the charts by Judy's Turn to Cry, a sequel to It's My Party that gets the boyfriend back, and other tales of teen romance like She's a Fool, That's the Way Boys Are, and Maybe I Know, as well as You Don't Own Me. And I think, something to remember back, during this time, like we're talking about, that's not the song we're going to listen to, but in 1963, the people listening to rock and roll, I wasn't alive then, believe it or not, but, they were mainly younger people. So these types of subject matter really worked for them, right? That's the majority of your audience. So Miss Gore is featured with James Brown, the Rolling Stones, the Supremes, and Marvin Gaye in the 1964 concerts at the Santa Monica Civic Auditorium. They were documented on the TAMI show. She also had moderate hits with some of the first Marvin Hamlish songs to be recorded: Sunshine, Lollipops, and Rainbows in 65, and California Nights in 1967. Yet at the peak of her pop career, she was in school full-time, majoring in English and American literature at Sarah Lawrence College in Bronxville, New York, where she graduated in 1968. She played an occasional television show or concert on weekends or during vacations. Wow, that's somebody who's really dedicated, right? ANCAT Dub says, "What Am I Going to Do With You?" The song we're going to listen to here. It features a more mature and sophisticated approach than Gore's early hit recordings. It sounds more like competition for the singles Burt Bacharach was producing for Dionne Warwick at the time. Quincy Jones gives the song a lush, Phil Spector-ish arrangement, but without the often murky aural fog associated with Spector's wall of sound. Here, clarity reigns supreme, and I do enjoy that. Leslie Gore's singing has the same plainness and clarity on this track as the arrangement, and her phrasing is particularly nice here. I've always appreciated her natural voice. By that, I mean she sings it straight, without any genre stylings ever. Nothing bluesy, jazzy, or like just honest, authentic Leslie Gore. In other words, not that treatment of jazzing it up and all those things. None of that. Leslie Gore, What Am I Going to Do With You? Same subject matter. All these girls getting their hearts broken. She's saying, how'd you feel if I did that to you? She hears that he's cheating on her. But I thought her voice had a real authentic sound to it. I thought I felt her emotion in it without her overdoing it. So, I definitely see what ANCAT's saying. Same kind of arrangement, nice arrangement there. But, another really good vocal performance. Next up, we got Irma Thomas with her song Live Again from 1965 composers, the great Burt Bacharach and Hal David. Irma Thomas is an American singer from New Orleans. She's known as the Soul Queen of New Orleans. That's a big title right there. She's a contemporary of Aretha Franklin and Etta James, but never experienced that level of commercial success. 2007, she won the Grammy Award for Best Contemporary Blues Album for After the Rain, her first Grammy in a career spanning over 50 years. ANCAT Dub says Live Again is one of two Bacharach and David compositions recorded by Thomas that were inexplicably not released at the time. It can be found on later compilation albums. It's hard to imagine anyone being embarrassed about this recording and withholding it. Just as dumb as Phil Spector refusing to push Darling Love Stumble and Fall / He's a Quiet Guy single, but instead withdrawing it on a whim. Although most people associate Dionne Warwick's vocals with Burt Bacharach compositions, Irma Thomas had the perfect voice for Bacharach's unique blend of R&B and quirky pop. Live Again, Irma Thomas. Once again, the guys left her, and she's out having fun, drinking and dancing with everybody, but then she gets in, but I still love you, so they're telling her you need to live again and get away from this guy, but she can't. But man, her voice is fantastic. Just fantastic. The arrangement is great. She should have been a way bigger star. You could just tell the second she started singing Bacharach and David, but the music landscape of the last 60 years is littered with people that should have been bigger, unfortunately. And Irma Thomas is definitely one of them. I'd never even heard of her. Next up, you see it below. Petula Clark, her 1967 hit Don't Sleep in the Subway. Composers were Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent. And my partner in crime on this channel, Trey, actually did a song reaction to this back in October of 2021. I remember him telling me how much he liked it. I never watched it. We don't watch each other's reactions. We don't got time for that. So this will be first for me. She is a British singer, songwriter, and actress. Her career spanned more than 7 decades, but was at its height during the 1960s and early 1970s. Her most famous recording was Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent's Downtown. Okay, I know that song. A smash hit in 1964 that beat out the Beatles to a Grammy and led her to be anointed the First Lady of the British Invasion. It probably didn't hurt that Clark looked and performed in an established, classy style, whereas the Beatles represented something wilder, noisier, and less tame. And that's a good point. Don't Sleep in the Subway was one of a number of singles recorded by Clark that were penned by Tony Hatch and Jackie Trent. The single peaked at number 5 in the US, 12 in the UK. It actually marked the beginning of her decline as a dominant force in pop music. Even so, she was everywhere in the 1960s. Her TV appearances were easily as numerous as those of Dionne Warwick and Nancy Wilson. All right, just a fantastic sound. Really liked her voice. Just like that. That song puts a smile on your face. Just the arrangement of it, the upbeatness of it. And she really led a crazy life. ANCAT sent me this article to read her. She's one of the best selling, if you're in the UK, you know this, but I don't know this being in the States. She's one of the best selling female artists in the history of the UK. All of this acclaim, done all of these things. And there's an interesting story. Her and Karen Carpenter in the late 60s, early 70s, went into Elvis's dressing room to talk with him after a show. And Elvis, this is the rated PG-13 version of this reaction, but angled for them to have a threesome with him with Elvis, but they declined. But it's a great article. There's a lot of good stuff in there. But she was world famous, and that was fantastic. Next up, we have Son of a Preacher Man from the great Dusty Springfield in 1968. Composers John Hurley and Ronnie Wilkins. It was said of Dusty, a fixture on British television. She presented many episodes of the hit 1963 through 1966 British TV music series Ready, Steady, Go. Between 66 and 69, hosted her own series on the BBC and ITV. In 1966, she topped the popularity polls, including Melody Maker's Best International Vocalist, and was the first UK singer to top the New Musical Express Readers Poll for Female Singer. She's a member of both the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the UK Music Hall of Fame. International polls have lauded her as one of the finest female popular singers of all time. ANCAT says, Dusty Springfield was an English singer with almost freakish ability to channel American rhythm and blues vocal stylings and spirit. Like her fellow countryman Joe Cocker, few questioned her authenticity and commitment to the genre. And to Springfield's credit, she consistently performed with Black American instrumentalists and background vocalists, bringing attention to these artists in the UK. This song is taken from her classic 1968 Dusty in Memphis album, a remarkably understated and mature-sounding effort. On her earlier singles, Springfield tended to power through the vocals to a very brassy and rocking backing. But on Son of a Preacher Man, her vocal style is often lighter, warmer, and more subdued. The performance smolders rather than burns brightly. But this change in approach has stood the test of time. Despite being lauded by music critics, the album sold poorly. Only Son of a Preacher Man single fared well, went to 9 in the UK, 10 in the US. Both album and single are now considered to be classics. By 2001, the album received the Grammy Hall of Fame Award and listed among the greatest albums of all time by Rolling Stone. Little fun fact on her, included by NCAT Dub. In November 1968, during the Dusty in Memphis sessions, she suggested to Jerry Wexler, one of the heads of Atlantic Records, that he should sign the newly formed UK band Led Zeppelin. She knew their bass guitarist, the great John Paul Jones, from his session work on her earlier albums. Without ever having seen them, and partly on her advice, Wexler signed Led Zepp to a $200,000 deal with Atlantic, and as they say, boys and girls, the rest is history. I know this song. This song's famous. I actually know this album. I mean, I don't know it real well, but Trey and I did an album draft series last year. We drafted our top fives, each of us a top five, from 1966 through 2022. And this actually was in my top five for that year, which was a lot of competition. So I very much like Dusty Springfield. Son of a Preacher Man, Stone Cold classic. And, you know, ANCAT Dub mentioned in the beginning of this journey for us here that the last two songs will let us know how music was going to evolve. And this was the next to the last song. You know, you hear the arrangement's totally different. Obviously, it has that Southern Stax sound that Elvis in Memphis had too, another album that I hold in incredibly high acclaim. So the arrangement, the musicianship is just fantastic, the backing vocals. But Dusty just owns this song, man. She's not overdoing it, but the tone of her voice, the confidence of her voice, it's just fantastic. And the arrangement just adds to it. I mean, not just because it's a Stone Cold classic. I just love the sound of this. And when I first heard this album, I'd only known Dusty. She did a duet, sort of a shared collaboration with the Pet Shop Boys back in like 86 or 87. What Have You Done For Me Lately? So I knew her from then because her name stuck out to me because I was actually dating a girl named Dusty and I'd never come across another girl named Dusty. I'm like, who is this? And she had the Springfield. I mean, Rick Springfield was still popular. So you're like, who is this? Is this Rick Springfield's sister? Oh, not quite, but fantastic. If you haven't listened to Dusty in Memphis, I highly recommend it. All right, we're going to finish this fantastic list off with These Days from Nico in 1967. Composer, the great Jackson Browne. We'll get into it here. Nico was a German singer, songwriter, actress, and model. She had roles in several films, including Fellini's La Dolce Vita in 1960 and Andy Warhol's Chelsea Girls in 1966. Reviewer Richard Goldstein describes Nico as half goddess, half icicle, and writes that her distinctive voice sounds something like a cello getting up in the morning. At the insistence of Warhol, yes, she sang on 3 songs of the Velvet Underground's debut album, The Velvet Underground and Nico, in 1967. Trey and I did a full reaction to that album, and both of us hold it in high acclaim as one of the best albums of all time. So go check that out after this. At the same time, she started a solo career and released Chelsea Girl in 1967. Nico's friend, Jim Morrison, of course, the frontman of The Doors, we have their whole catalog up as well, suggested that she start writing her own material. She then composed songs on a harmonium, not traditionally a rock instrument. John Cale of the Velvet Underground became her musical arranger and produced The Marble Index in 1968, Desert Shore in 1970, and The End in 1974, and other subsequent albums. In the 1980s, she toured extensively in Europe, United States, Australia, and Japan. After a concert in Berlin in June 1988, she went on a holiday in Ibiza to rest and died as a result of a cycling accident. You know what? I did not know that. I did not know that part. And Cat Dub says Nico was no great singer, but she was distinct and kind of mesmerizing to listen to. And the fact that no one particularly cared that she had no vocal range or great control over her voice demonstrates the extent to which rock music had come to dominate mainstream pop. It's a great point. Jackson Browne wrote this at the age of 16, and it was first recorded by Nico in 1967 from this, her debut album. Nico's quiet, simple arrangement's iconic and was used by several other artists in their covers. My guess is Nico was channeling, of course, Francois Adi for this track, who was our second track, I do believe, on here. So I know this song in one way. I did a reaction to this song over 2 years ago at the time of this filming. That's the only time I've ever listened to it. And I do remember being like, I don't know about this. So I'm curious 2 years later. I've listened to a ton of music since then. I've evolved since then, right? We're always evolving. I'm curious what I'm going to think of it now. These days, Nico, I got tons of stuff to say on this song. Number one, the songwriting by Jackson Browne at 16, and he's playing on it, right? He's playing the finger picking part. It's not an acoustic. It's an electric guitar because Andy Warhol wanted her to sound more modern, and so he didn't want an acoustic on there. That's what Jackson said. But, you got the string quartet. I mean, the arrangement of this is beautiful. The songwriting for somebody at 16, well, for anybody at any age, is really, really good. You had one little rhyme scheme in there that was a little the gambling, rambling. But, I mean, it's fantastic. It's deep. I mean, it's really about anxiety and depression. And Jackson said he just wrote it about himself. He goes, you don't got a whole lot of life cycle to write about when you're 16. So it's fantastic. It's been covered by several people. I just can't get there on Nico's voice. I just cannot do it. I just don't like it. But I like the song, the longer one. I think the arrangement made up for it, right? And she's doing what she can do. I know a lot of people like her, and she seemed to be a very interesting person. And that's kind of what Ann Cat Dove was getting. Nobody even cared. She didn't have a vocal range. But compared to these other vocalists, like, there's no comparison. But, I mean, popularity reigns a lot of times. And, I mean, I can tell you tons of female singers that have come since that, and males and whoever, that didn't have the vocal chops, but had the look or something about them that made them go over big. But this song's not going to be on my favorites because of her voice. I mean, I didn't hate it, but the arrangement and the songwriting would be. So just keep that in mind. And that is going to segue me into my favorite tracks. That's always interesting. There's 14 tracks on this. I told Ann Cat Dub he could go deep. I mean, the songs are short. It's tough because Ann Cat knows a lot about music, as you can tell from the write-up. So they are picking, like, really, really good stuff. So when I do the faves on Ann Cat's list, it's always difficult because they're all pretty darn good, right? It's not like an album where you got weak tracks and stuff. So honorable mention, we're going to go He's a Quiet Guy, Darlene Love. It probably would have been a fave, but Spector could have mixed her vocals more to the forefront for me there. We'll go Losing My Touch by Peggy March. We'll go What Am I Gonna Do With You, Leslie Gore. Now we'll get to my faves. There's quite a few of them. Don't Turn Your Back on Me, Jackie DeShannon. Where Does That Leave Me, Nancy Wilson, the great Nancy Wilson. Are You There with Another Girl, Dionne Warwick. Live Again by Irma Thomas. Don't Sleep in the Subway, Petula Clark. And you know the last one. Of course you know, because I went on about it. Son of a Preacher Man by Dusty Springfield. All right, let me know your favorites below. I'm really interested in your thoughts on these artists and on this list. And once again, a total shout out to Ann Cat Dub for trying to curate this thing and putting all this research together. This is a lot of work. So appreciate that. Until next time, guys, I will see you.